Thousands in the street in defiance of Beijing, angered at its tightening control over the territory. Triad gangsters attacking protesters on Hong Kong's subway after a night of violent protests. Violence escalating between Hong Kong police and protesters as rubber bullets are being fired. Now the phrase "Hong Kong is not China" is being heard more often as a battle cry of the territory that was supposed to showcase the one country, two systems put in place by the departing British colonial government. But what does this have to do with demographics, the financial system in China, historical precedent, and of all things, Donald Trump? We'll find out in just the next few minutes.
Good evening. The handover is done. The ceremonies and celebrations over. A century and a half of British rule in Hong Kong is simply history tonight. China is in charge now. It's already Tuesday in Hong Kong, the first dawn of a new era. A very rainy dawn. In spite of the terrible weather, Hong Kong's new flag and the Chinese flag were raised over all of Hong Kong's government buildings.
Hong Kong was returned to Chinese sovereignty in 1997 by the British, who negotiated a 50-year window of built-in semi-autonomy for their former colony. Since this time, the territory has gone from a manufacturing to a financial hub. This arrangement has worked out well for both sides for the first 2 decades of its rule by mainland China, but things are beginning to change, and Hong Kong, at least in the eyes of the government in Beijing, can no longer be allowed free rein in a country that historically has very little holding it together. Hong Kong is not China, can no longer be allowed to be said, considered, and in no way be, at least according to the government in Beijing. According to geopolitical strategist Peter Zion, there are several reasons for this. First, the Chinese export-led economic strategy has come to its conclusion. The demographics in destination countries for Chinese goods have peaked, and they will no longer be able to consume the excess manufacturing as they once did. Also, the end result of decades of the one-child policy has arrived, and the Chinese population itself has already peaked. Thus, internal demand in China cannot be swapped out with the dwindling external demand that it's facing. More to the point, the Chinese financial system has for decades prioritized employment over profit, thus to ensure domestic political stability. But this has riddled the system with a myriad of debt bombs just waiting to be triggered. In addition, the world order that has been maintained by the United States, and in particular its Navy, is currently in the retreat, and with it, foreign technology and capital infusions to China, as well as massive global markets to dump their goods into, and with no replacement, the country is caught between a rock and a hard place. China is also desperately reliant upon oil coming out of the Middle East. 2/3, in fact, come directly from the Gulf region. Any destabilization or current escalation within that area would send prices soaring and have a tremendous and devastating effect on the nation's economy. And to its detriment, and despite working hard to build a blue water navy, the nation does not have the resources or the ability to guarantee the freedom of the shipping lanes should securing needed crude be necessary. And very important, but much overlooked by the mainstream media in the West, is the targeting of the Chinese economy by the Trump administration. The ongoing trade war with America is one that the Chinese can neither sustain nor can they back down from. To put it in very simple terms, China is facing problems on all sides: diplomatically, financially, politically, economically, demographically, and as always for China, socially. The leaders of the Communist Party are, of course, aware of the precarious nature that the country finds itself in, and are very aware of the inherent instability of the country. And its President Xi Jinping has been made leader for life, ostensibly in order to curb the excesses of the chaos that potentially could come down the pike. And he has used his first years in power squelching any and all dissent within the party, as well as any kind of calls for regional autonomy. In fact, social dissent is being met with ever more ingenious means of control. The nation actually plans to rank all of its citizens based on their social credit by 2020, where people can be rewarded or punished according to their scores, where they can not only name you publicly as a bad citizen, but they can even take away your dog. And no, I'm not kidding. Now, frame the recent protests against a new extradition law that would replicate existing laws in mainland China, allowing for citizens, and this part is important, not only citizens, but also foreigners living in the city to be arrested under the guise of Chinese warrants and deported to the mainland. So what does this mean? Well, it's a very clear loss, 3 decades early, of the two systems, one country policy. Now, when you look at somebody like President Xi and you understand that he understands the current winds of geopolitical fortune the country finds itself in, understanding the entire system around the protests, as well as the calls for Hong Kong to have more autonomy, well, it all becomes a whole lot clearer. It's absolutely necessary, from Beijing's point of view, to rope in any calls for or any aspirations of independence that the people of Hong Kong still may harbor. Beijing, through whatever means, is going to show the people of Hong Kong that it is part of China and it has no other choice, whether it likes it or not. Thus, the recent escalation in violence over the past several days, as well as the attacks on the city's assembly building, has ratcheted up the stakes in this game of brinkmanship, and China is not going to blink. No matter what comes next, in the eyes of Beijing, Hong Kong has become an existential threat to the unity of the nation, and these actions will no longer be tolerated and allowed to continue. To put this into perspective, the protests in Tiananmen Square involved some 300,000 or so, mostly students, and the communists sent in almost that same number to quash them. The protests in Hong Kong, in contrast, vary between 1 to 2 million people and are made up of a broad cross-section of the population, most of whom would never usually protest. To this threat to the unity of the country, Beijing might see a full military invasion of the territory as well as occupation, but you'd have to understand this, of course, would be a last resort. More likely than not is that these protests in Hong Kong will mark the end of the two systems, one country system, several decades early, and China will do everything it can now to control the flow of information to the mainland from Hong Kong so as to keep the wider population ignorant of the plight of the territory during what can only be called an active crackdown. However this plays out, Hong Kong will not be the place it once was. A very sad state of affairs, even from a personal perspective, as I very much enjoyed my time in that territory, as well as imbibing the absolute difference between it and the mainland, and I feel it will be quite a while till I return. I also do expect that this lesson will not be lost on the people of Taiwan. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of material, please consider subscribing. Also hit the bell to be notified when new material is uploaded. As well, please subscribe to me over at BitChute, which is now the platform of choice and the only one with freedom of speech. This channel now is totally demonetized, so I want to thank each and every one of you that helped support this project, both financially and morally. And please, if you can, like and share these videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.